Over the years, our family's had its share of health problems.
So prescriptions are a part of our life.
Before we went to the big box store.
We both thought it would help us save. But with the long lines and impersonal service, filling prescriptions became a chore. That's when a friend recommended D&H.
Now Tristan knows our prescriptions. Brenda always helps us find the right vitamins. And after Dad's fall, Monica's been a real expert with all our home medical needs. All without the lines.
Trust and service.
That's our D&H.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Thursday, January the 21st. Pleasure to have you with us today. We've got a friend of mine here, former Representative John Wright. Good to have you here, John.
Good to be with you, Paul.
This is what, your second or third time with us on Radio Friends?
Second time, I believe.
Yeah. And when I said, what do you want to talk about today? He said, well, I want to talk about something that you think may be boring, but it really isn't. We're going to talk about tax credits. Now, when we talk about tax credits, explain what they are, because I was a little bit confused when we started talking today.
That's right, Paul. Well, first, a little bit of background. When I served in the Missouri State House of Representatives, constituents would ask me all the time, why does it seem like everything is getting more expensive? Why does it seem like college tuition is going up at such a high rate? How come it seems like I'm paying more tax dollars and yet my schools are pinched and our roads are crumbling? And the primary reason for that is that the taxpayers of the state of Missouri are being the victims of a great robbery that's taking place in broad daylight, and the accomplice in the getaway car is the Missouri State Legislature. The robbery is taking place through a series of programs that are special subsidies that are being directed to private interest groups that go under the friendly sounding name of tax credits. But this has grown to a very, very large scale in the state, and it's putting all kinds of pressures on our budget, and it's really beginning to impact our schools and our roads and a lot of other things.
So how do tax credits work? If you make a donation to a charity, and many times at the end of the year, you'll get an email and you make a donation to a very legitimate charity, and you get a tax credit for that. Are you saying that that is taking money away from the state?
Well, here's how it works. So these programs started in the late 1990s, and they started with good intentions. And the original intentions were programs just like what you're describing, encourage private contributions to charitable causes. Since they were developed in the late 1990s, a lot of very sophisticated private groups have realized that they can have tax credits directed to them. The largest group is real estate developers in St. Louis and Kansas City, but groups as diverse as charcoal producers, grape growers, film producers in the state have all managed to secure special tax credit programs for themselves over the years. These programs have grown from less than 2% of our state budget in the late 1990s to nearly 8% of our state budget today. Now let me put that in perspective. These subsidies to private groups are costing our state almost as much as we spend on corrections and public safety in the state of Missouri every year. $700 million a year, $2 billion off-balance sheet liability for the subsidies that have already been handed out. So this is a big issue. When we ask, why is it that it seems like we pay the same or greater tax dollars than we ever have, and yet the state's funding for the University of Missouri has been cut by a third per pupil over the last decade? Why is it that we can't manage to fill our foundation formula and fund K through 12 education? This is the answer. It's these tax credit programs. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine that you own a general store.
Okay.
And you've hired a store clerk to watch after the store when you're not there. The store clerk starts writing out coupons for free stuff and handing those coupons out to his friends. His friends come in and take free TVs, they take free iPad, free stereo, redeeming their coupons. And in the meantime, those friends take your store clerk out for steak dinners and fancy golf outings, take him to the World Series. And you can't figure out why your general store is going broke. And your clerk says, "Don't look at me, I haven't taken any cash out of the register." And the problem is that all of this expenditure is taking place outside of our standard accounting procedures.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, the expenditure of these coupons are not treated as expenses on the state books. And once the coupons are outstanding that can be redeemed against state dollars, they're not treated as state liabilities. If our state government were treated like a business, I'm convinced that there are legislators who would go to jail for cooking the books, because the accounting for these programs is no different from Enron or Lehman Brothers. It's spending money that's not being captured on our expenditures on the books because of the way that the accounting has been tailored, and it's outstanding liabilities that are very, very large that aren't showing up as debt.
Now, how can people investigate this themselves? If they say, this is really interesting to me, I want to find out what's going on, how do they go about doing it?
The best work that has been done is work by a tax credit commission that the governor appointed in 2010. They wrote a terrific report detailing the history of tax credit programs and outlining what they're costing the state, how they've impacted education and the taxes that we all pay. And that's available online. Anybody can Google search it. So, again, how does this impact us? If you work at the University of Missouri, if you have kids at the University of Missouri, it impacts you because state spending to the University of Missouri is down by a third per pupil over the last decade and a half. If you have kids in the public schools, it impacts you. If you're a taxpayer, it impacts you because you're paying more taxes than you need to. So what can we do about it? Well, there are three things that we could do about it. Number one, we need to have legislation that brings this whole regime of tax credit coupon subsidies into the accounting system that governs all the rest of our state budget.
So it's not off the books, but it's on the books.
We need to bring them back on the books. Now, I sponsored legislation to do just that 2 years ago, and my greatest allies in the House were Tea Party Republicans who felt so strongly about this issue that they were willing to weather the political risks of being associated with tax credit reform. But we had a great coalition. We didn't get to a majority. That's number one. Number two, we as voters need to hold our representatives accountable, and we need to make clear to our representatives, if you support these private subsidies that are costing our schools, we're going to vote against you in the next election. The store clerk needs to know that the owner is watching. And the third thing that we can do is finally pass comprehensive ethics reform in the House and the Senate and ban lobbyist gifts and cap campaign contributions just like many other states have. Because if the store clerk can no longer get those fancy trips and steak dinners and World Series tickets from his friends, he won't have the incentive to write so many coupons. So you change the system and you will get better substantive outcomes.
Give us the web address to check this information again, you said?
Just Google search Missouri Tax Credit Commission.
Okay. John Wright, thank you for coming by, former state representative, and I do hope you'll come back again.
Thank you, Paul.
All right,
appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Renew Missouri, our program directed by Travis McMillen of the Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio, Pat Akers from KBIA. Our flow director is Kevin Casson, and our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. I'd love to hear from you, something you'd like to hear. Drop me an email, pepperp@missouri.edu. Bye-bye.